Hi everyone, and welcome to an episode of Trident Talks. I'm Josh, the director here at Trident, and today I'm joined by Jason Passwaters, COO and co-founder of Intel 471. Jace, hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I know it's quite early in the US, so I appreciate your time. So, Jace, if you wouldn't mind, just a quick introduction, who you are and kind of what your role at Intel 471 is.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the COO and co-founder here at Intel 471. We're a cyber threat intel company based in the United States, but we do have a presence across the globe, probably about 14 countries now. So probably around 140 people. And we're kind of an intel company by intel professionals. We're, folks are kind of come from the intel backgrounds, law enforcement, and our whole approach is to look at cybercrime kind of from an intel perspective and really like how can we meet the needs of our clients so they can make more informed decisions. My role specifically, now I'm a practitioner at heart, so I'm always looking to get in the trenches and get my hands dirty. But most of the time my role is kind of to oversee the more strategic level stuff at the company, drive the strategy, help define the strategy, and really kind of look for issues and problems that I can help fix around the company.
Awesome. And where are you based?
I'm in Dallas, North Dallas, Texas.
Nice. Feels like a bit of a hotspot for Intel and just generally cyber tech.
Yeah, Dallas is really has really kind of become I'd say a second hub to maybe the DC area in Northern Virginia. So you see a lot of businesses coming in here across many different industries, but a lot of threat intel folks here working out of Dallas and Houston and Austin.
Yeah, I'm playing as well. Yeah, awesome. So I wanted to get you on today. Obviously, I know you guys quite well, but specifically yourself, because I know you've been through this journey of, and the topic I want to discuss is around the differences in the US versus the UK when veterans are leaving the military or guys and girls are leaving, going through what we call resettlement and how they best transition into the industry, into the private sector. Obviously, we'll kind of be more specific around threat intel here, given your background and what you're doing now, but just generally the journey that you went on, the kind of what the similarities and the differences and what I suppose we're quite behind the US in terms of just general intel. And I know we're catching up, we're doing pretty well, but especially around supporting military leavers into the industry. So if we can take away, I know lots of viewers and listeners here are from the UK, so what can we learn from you guys? So would you mind just kind of running us through and taking us back down that journey of when you kind of, I suppose, first handed your notice in and kind of where you were based and how you kind of come about that?
Well, I think you've got to go a bit further back than, when I put my notice in and I looked to leave and join the civilian world, because I was in the Marines for just under 12 years, and there's a lot of opportunities that are provided in the US military for training and just kind of, expanding your knowledge on various things, regardless of what your actual specialty is. I mean, there's always opportunities. Every base, has an education center, so you can take college courses right there on base. And I did a lot of that through my career where, instead of going to lunch with everybody, I would, be taking college courses, university courses there on the base. And all of it was just to kind of, feed a kind of a hunger for knowledge and to kind of improve myself and just always learning. So I always took advantage of anything that was kind of provided to me in the military. My first job was as an infantry scout, but I quickly figured out, after my first enlistment, that's not what I wanted to do, and it wasn't really a lot of hard skills that in the civilian space that I was going to be able to translate over. There's a lot of soft skills, of course, leadership and all. But I ended up doing a lateral move into counterintelligence and human intelligence. So that's where I spent the last 2 enlistments of the last just over maybe 8-9 years doing that. And again, just always taking advantage of any of the opportunities to learn. And I kind of moved into a technical field called technical surveillance countermeasures. So really it was just looking for bugs, listening devices. And from there, I got exposed to like packet data and packet analysis and network traffic and stuff like that. And again, being overseas, then your opportunities you would think would maybe kind of be a bit more limited, and they are to somewhat. But I mean, I think the U.S. military does a really good job at making sure that there are still opportunities for military members to kind of, grow and expand their knowledge and learn things. So again, I was taking, university courses on a ship, whenever I could. And then really what was the kind of nexus for me getting into cyber threat intel, or the beginning, if you will. I did a joint exchange with the FBI. I was hosted a few guys over in Okinawa, Japan, where I was living at the time. And they did a lot of cyber stuff, intrusion analysis, forensic stuff like that. And yeah, that kind of, ended up being a job offer, because that just one chance exchange, we turned it into an annual thing where we would just get together once a year in Okinawa. They would fly out, and they ended up asking if I wanted a job. It was a contractor position, so I'm not sure in the UK if contractor positions are a big thing, because I've seen in some countries like it's not as big, but in the US, you can get a position with, say, the FBI, not necessarily the FBI directly, but you can be a permanent kind of contractor, supporting cyber agents directly from within the FBI. So that's what I ended up doing, and that exposed me to how organized cybercrime works. And I really kind of, I was a technical analyst, network forensics, intrusion analysis. But once I got kind of pulled in, I got pulled into a pretty big case where we were tracking pretty much the top tier of Eastern European and Russian language organized cybercrime. And that really exposed me to what I say is how it works. But again, like I've always just had, kind of a passion for this, to learn, to kind of just always reading and anywhere I can find information about, how this stuff works and who these folks are, you name it. And I think that's been a key to me moving up over the years. And then just to sum it up, like I ended up going to iSIGHT Partners. I saw this company, this is end of 2010, beginning 2011. And, this company was doing, real intel but it was cyber related. So I said, wow, my two worlds kind of, come together in one company, my intel background and the cyber background. So I ended up there, building out a global department there and running that with a lot of good folks. And, here we are now. Last 7 years, we've been building Intel 471, doing cyber threat intel, pretty much across the full spectrum, focus on the full spectrum of cybercrime.
Nice. Some journey. Where do we start? So if I could kind of like pick that apart holistically, like a lot of it is around you wanting, and like it sounds cliche, but the more you put into it, the more you get out, right? In terms of development, because in the UK, right, you spend a lot of time on ship, especially in the Marines, where I was. You do some time on ship reluctantly. You'd rather be on the ground, but you'll see a lot of, maybe it's a different mindset, but a lot of guys and girls, majority of them will be doing lots of fizz, doing some dry drills, and depending on what their specialization is, and watching lots of movies.
Yeah.
Less so will they be doing an A level or doing a certification. So think about the future of, okay, I need to upskill myself in this area. I think it's less supported, and I'll probably get shot down for this, but it's less supported in UK military around upskilling and development. And you'll have on camp, you'll have like an education center, but it's kind of like, it's run by one lady you go there just because you have to, or you want to do a language course and you kind of half-ass it, and you don't really, it's not structured. And it's not like, right, this next 6 months, you need to get from here to here and become this linguist, because of, we want to deploy you into this particular location. It's just interesting how the setup is, but then you still need to have the individual to want to learn it and want to go and improve themselves all the time. It's a bit, I suppose, a big sort of takeaway there. The contracting world in the UK, it does exist. Do people leave the military and go straight into contracting? Rarely, because again, I think people in the UK still have that mindset, or hiring managers, regardless of their backgrounds, whether military or not, have that mentality of, this person's got no private commercial experience. So I can't bring them in as a contractor, because contractors are seen as very experienced, capable individuals who get paid a lot per day. So typically people will come into a mid-level role, junior role, depending on what they've done in the military, as a permanent member of staff, and then potentially go contracting 5-10 years later.
Yeah. And with the contracting, I'm not talking about like an independent contractor. It's more of, defense contracting.
Oh,
So, you
like a
know,
Booz Hamilton.
A Booz Allen Hamilton,
Yeah.
the company I was lucky enough to be, so I really enjoy working for small companies. And at the time when
Mm.
I left, there was a small company that had a really, good contract with the Bureau. And it gave me just an opportunity to be, more or less, permanently based and stationed within a
Yeah.
unit at the FBI and to support FBI agents directly on the cyber. So, it's those kind of opportunities that expose you to things that open up
Mm.
your next opportunity. And that's kind of been the
Yeah.
key, to my kind of trajectory, if you will.
I think that is more common on that point. You have the Deloittes of the world, the Airbus, the BAEs, the Kinetics, who have a very heavy military presence. So it's a nice softer landing for someone leaving. Also, they've got contracts back into defence, so it's quite a familiar environment. And their skill set is obviously they've got clearance, which is really helpful and expensive in civilian life. And yeah, it's a softer landing, and usually their network is of people in those companies. So yeah, sorry, yeah. That is quite a big presence in the UK. When you leave the US military, how long's the notice period?
Well, you're on a contract, so you kind of know when your date, when you're
Okay.
gonna finish up. So you're on a 4 year, typically it's a 4 year contract.
Okay.
And when that EAS, end of active service, is going to come up, so you start preparing, and they've got a decent, almost required kind of an exit process, like exit process that
Yeah.
involves an entire block of time spending. Actually, it was in the same building as the education center, so I think
Okay.
that's a really good thing. If you look at the actual education center, say in Okinawa, where I was, it's a big building. I mean, there's different, yeah, services that are there, not just the education. So they do invest a lot there. And there's
Mm.
a whole aspect of that is for folks that are exiting active service to get them prepared. And it can do anything from, resume, writing, how to prepare your resume or your CV. Also doing mock interviews, because if you think about a military person, like I was in the military for just under 12 years, and I'd never done, I went in right after high school. I'd never done an interview, you know,
Yeah.
since like before, when I was in high school working, odd jobs or whatever at the fast
Yeah.
food restaurant or something. So that was all really, really good. And I took again, it's like you said, right? It's what you put into it is what you get. So I took it very, very seriously. I would show up in a jacket,
Mm.
as if I was going in an interview, and some others did that. But then there was the other end of the spectrum where, folks were just kind of going through the motions. And a
Yeah.
lot of times I think, that's going to show, right? That lack of kind of effort or lack of kind of drive to, I guess, take it seriously. And
Real life simulation, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
If you treat it like a real life interview, then when you do go through the real deal, it's going to be a very familiar environment or setup that you've
yeah.
had before, right?
And
Even just having that tie done up to your neck, it's just that
yeah,
uncomfortable feeling, right?
yeah. And I actually really flopped on my first interview with the
Yeah.
folks that I was, I had been doing a technical
Mm.
exchange. And I think, kind of one of the other subjects, as we talk about like what's important, or what are some of the things you could do, really networking. That was a 3 year, the relationships I built with those folks actually, as a human intelligence guy, building relationships is important, right? It's kind of a skill
Mm.
that you have to have. And so for 3 years, I had built relationships with these folks, and I flopped on the interview. But because I had been networking with them for so long, and I had been like interacting with them, they kind of knew what my core competencies were. They knew what my
Yeah.
skill set were. And it actually helped me overcome a really bad interview, and I still got the job offer. So I was actually
So,
happy with that.
yeah, but you've already demonstrated your capability, right? Because you were fortunate enough to have that network or been
Mhm.
around them in a working environment, albeit for a different employer.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's common as well, whereby if I've left the Marines and I've worked with guys in Intel, but a different cap badge and different unit, but then they are now working at a commercial company, they know me because of my previous. I might have interviewed for them and then probably interviewed people above them or below them in different teams. and I might flop, but they'll go, actually, this guy's solid or this girl's solid.
Yeah.
I've worked with him before. I'll vouch for them.
And he's spent 12, he's spent the last decade in the
yeah,
military, and he's never had to do an interview,
yeah.
a real interview. So give him a break. So I think networking though is like it's the importance of networking is just it comes into play in so many different areas, not necessarily just getting a job, but even doing your job. I mean, like information sharing, building trust relationships, where if you run into something, in your workplace, or you're dealing with some kind of, threat or something, or some kind of issue, to reach back to people is always very, very useful.
Yeah, on that point around, we'll go on to that kind of the advice piece now,
Yeah.
around networking. People think it just stops, right? Like everyone knows the importance, or I hope they do, and they'll have to, of the kind of pre-employment networking and speaking to as many people as possible. But I can't tell you the amount of times I've like reached out to people, like Mark, for example, and I'll text him going, hey, I've got this issue, or what do you know about this or that? And he'll just ping me back a message, and like, it's never the networking piece before. It doesn't stop, basically, I suppose is my advice.
Yeah, it doesn't stop, and it's a very, very small world. That's what you find out, especially when you come into an industry like cyber threat intel. You never know when that relationship could come in handy, both ways too, right? It's a two-way street, because nobody likes somebody that just kind of sucks information and always reaches out when they need something, but they're never available when somebody reaches out to them. But yeah, it's like super, super important. It's actually a big part of the cyber threat intel industry. It's just networking and relationship building, trust groups, trust relationships, you name it. And a lot of times, folks are naturally going to hire, if you're thinking about just hiring, they're naturally going to hire a known commodity over an unknown, if you have parity on the skills and, on the, I guess, the tangibles and requirements around the job. Typically they're going to lean towards a known commodity. So
when you are hiring at 471, and you know what their background is, do you do your research? Do you do reference checks? Do you speak to people that might know that person, just to kind of get the inside knowledge?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because an interview is, we have a pretty stringent interview process. Like the team will run folks, through a lot of different, I guess, challenges, if you will, from practical type exercises to like a panel interview to one-on-one interviews. So there's a screening process, but, part of it will be to, typically if you're in this industry, or if you're, people have heard of you, people know you because the networking side is so big. So it's easy to ask around and get references. We always ask for references, obviously, but if we know, and you just go on LinkedIn, you can see LinkedIn is just an amazing resource for many different things, but you can quickly see who's linked to who and say, hey, this person, what are your experiences? So
yeah, sure. And it's also important, I'm guessing, when an individual is building their LinkedIn profile, and what the posts they're putting out, who they're connecting with, what their profile looks like, the structure, the quality of information, not diverging or divert too much information, sensitive info. So you will look at those people's profiles as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're, anything that's out there, we're going to look at, right? If it's going to help, because, we have built a company around a culture, I think, that is, I mean, our retention, for our employees is just, over the last 7 years, is just amazing. And I think it's because we're just very particular about who we hire and who we bring in. And a lot of it has to do with, really figuring out, making sure there's a culture fit here, and that's where you'll see a lot of times that culture might not show itself in an interview, but it will show itself in, how people present themselves, on LinkedIn, and how they post, if they're pushing content, so we'll look at that as well and factor it into the decision.
Yeah, nice. Just lastly on the advice piece, how did you know when you left? Obviously, you knew the people in the consultancy you're working for, the defense contractor. How did you know your own expectations around like the finances? So how did you know, right, I'm on currently this as a Marine, this is what I need when I leave, can I get that? Is it possible? How did you work that out?
Well, I think so. So my experience, I left in 2008, is when I left active service. And, the first, so I think it could be the same, like defense contractor, you make a decent paycheck, depending on who you're working for and kind of what parent agency you might be assigned to. but the pay was so much different and so much better. Like my wife and I were just kind of like, what are we going to do with all this money? And in the whole scheme of things, now I look back and we were just coming out of the military, out of the Marines, where we were very frugal and we were very just like, it was very simple. So when you're coming into the civilian world, you're now kind of, left to your own devices a bit, where you've got to, there's a lot of different needs and different requirements and all, so you don't realize that coming out. As far as like expectations, I mean, I was blind, I didn't know what good was when it came to pay. I just thought this is an awesome increase in salary, so we're gonna love it.
Yeah.
So, but I think locale is a big thing, like cost of living. That's one thing I've learned, is that, you need to take the salary might sound good, but if you're commuting, like I was commuting at one time 57 miles each way just to get into to my office. So that, and the pay was okay and good, but do that for 3 years and that pay is not looking so good anymore after probably about 6 months.
Yeah, you got the trade-off, right? Anything's better than a soldier's salary, but it's just are you being paid the fair rate? We see a lot in the UK where people who will talk to ex-colleagues who have left and gone, that are in the civilian world for the last few years, and the majority, instead of taking the mean salary of what all of their friends have, they go to the top, right? And they go, well, X person got this, and you think, great, that's an anomaly. We need to look at a few things, right? What's your bottom line? What can you live on? What would you like? And what's relevant to your skill set?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, is that a lot of folks have expectations. They spent, maybe they spent 10, 15, even 20 years in the military. And, in a lot of ways they're coming out. So I had a decision, right, when I left the military, is like, okay, I can do just over 8 years more and I'm going to retire from the military and I'll get a paycheck, or a retirement check. But that's not going to, the retirement check that I get is not going to be enough to actually, where I can retire and not have to work. I mean, I had young kids and stuff, and, my kids are older now, but I knew I was going to have to continue to work if I wanted to get where I wanted to be from a retirement perspective. So then it's about calculating, like, okay, in the amount of time that I stay in and retire, I know what my retirement would be like, but how long will it take me to move up the ladder, and what's the opportunity cost associated with staying in versus getting out? And I calculated the opportunity cost. It was much more beneficial to get out for my goals, both financially and just professionally. I felt like I had to hit a bit of a ceiling in the military. And I said, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to stay in till retirement, because I think I can get well beyond what the retirement's going to offer. If I get into the corporate world and start kind of making my way up the ladder, there, where, you start out, things can change pretty quickly in the corporate world, in the civilian world, if you, start taking on leadership roles and stuff like that.
Yeah, so kind of like looking at the bigger picture and kind of weighing up pros and cons, and
sure.
it probably helped having a wife to bounce ideas off and to keep you grounded about what does it look like. I'm sure you'd have just enlisted again and just been around all the guys.
Yeah, she's my rock for sure. And she actually she's from from Northern England, so she's a Brit, so she has another perspective. So
nice. Okay, cool. And I suppose also it's such a weird concept to talk about money coming out of the military when everybody knows what everyone's on, right? You're in bandings. Well, in the UK, you're on bandings. Everyone's like, right, you're this rank, you're paid this, depending on how many years you're in. It's just a weird topic and concept.
There's a lot of that, like those little things that, are commonplace in the civilian world that are just kind of foreign to a military person, like you said, like, I've seen military folks talking about salaries and stuff, and it's like, hey, this isn't the military where it's like published, they publish the pay scale. And some companies do publish pay scales and stuff, but it's a bit of a more private thing in the private sector, in the civilian world. But I would suggest, like, anybody really, like, again, when it's coming to, it's about kind of teaching yourself or learning this stuff. One of the things that I found in the small kind of startup world is, getting equity in a company. Somebody, is a startup and you come in and, I'm thinking about day-to-day living and what I want to make per year, but there's a whole nother side of, like, if somebody's offering actual stock in a startup, like, what does that mean? I didn't know what a vesting schedule was, there's all these little things that, if you knew, I mean, I had some pretty expensive lessons learned when it comes to that kind of stuff where, okay, I was making a decent paycheck, but I knew if I'm running like, a third of the company, and I know that on the exit, I'm only going to make, this much, so if I would have known now what I know then, if I knew now what I, could have known then, I would have been much better off in negotiating my package up front. So,
and that's why it's so important to have a network of people who have been through that process. Maybe people have
sure.
left before, and you can kind of get that advice. There's loads of like networking groups, and I assume there's groups in the US depending on what unit you're in, that people
Yeah.
still talk to each other, right? Or the vets groups.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just talking to somebody just 2 days ago that a military friend he's been in the commercial space, but he's been in the defense contracting side, and he's looking to get into the straight up civilian, private space. And he doesn't know, he wants to get into the sales side, but he doesn't know how the pay and the commission schemes work and all of that stuff. So I said, hey, let me link you up with our guys that kind of sit on that side. I'll link you up with the lead who will explain that to you, how it works. So you can go into a negotiation for your pay package, understanding what they're talking about. So you don't shortchange yourself.
Yeah, being informed, absolutely. Okay, cool. So, and now just kind of like lastly, and just more generally, what's the future look like for 471? What's the plans? You're growing like crazy. Headcount just keeps growing up and up and up. What's the future?
Yeah, I mean, the future is just to continue to build, I think, more, we've built the foundation, we've built the kind of product and the technology, all of that. If you look at kind of our trajectory and our build out, it hasn't focused a lot on the marketing and the sales side. We were kind of wanted to, get the foundation, I guess you could say, solid first. And we've done that. And now it's about just kind of, continuing to do what we do. But really, the vision is about seeing CTI mature in the industry, continue to mature. So, it's getting down market. So it's going way down market to folks that you typically, might not think would be able to use or afford even CTI. But also seeing that, organizations CTI is getting outside of what I say, outside the knock sock, right? So typically the first stage is to support, the knock sock, cybersecurity folks. But, I think what you're seeing is this maturity rise to where CTI is supporting risk, fraud, knock sock, cybersecurity. They're, supporting all these various stakeholders and consumers internally in their organization. And it's really kind of justifying their existence and the value that they provide to an organization. So you're starting to see that a lot with a number of different industries, not just like in the finance side. Like a lot of people think that that's where, where everything happens, but you're seeing it in healthcare, you're seeing it in the airline industry and travel industry. Obviously oil and gas is coming on strong too with CTI. So it's cool to see that. Yeah, and it's good for business. So
absolutely, I agree. And also I think we're finally seeing the maturity levels somewhat keep kind of getting aligned with the military to some degree, because I think back in the day, you'd never do anything without intel. You'd never move anywhere. You'd never go on a patrol. You'd never deploy anywhere. Or if intel changed, then your plans changed. And, but in the private sector, it's like an afterthought. I think it's getting way better. And you're seeing that because you guys are growing, other people are growing, more people are going into the industry. It's growing. Generally.
Yeah. And what you're seeing too is that, the bad guys are in some ways forcing maturity, and it's actually, to keep up and to stay ahead of the threat. You're seeing Intel play a good role into making sure that their organizations are informed about like what the threat is, who the threat, how they operate, all the aspects of it. You go back 10 years, you would have never thought that a security practitioner within an org was going to be having to deal with like negotiating a ransom with a cyber criminal, like directly or through, an intermediary, dealing with, these kind of crippling ransomware attacks. I mean, Intel has really kind of solidified its position within the commercial space, I think, and it's only kind of going up from here.
And you guys have had a cool new rebrand, new launch?
Yeah, we've, we just pushed out a whole new website and a rebrand. Like I said, I think it was just a few months ago, we've started really doing some marketing for the first time. But we've kind of been behind the scenes. So really looking forward to seeing that, start to push new business and stuff. And again, like the vision is to really get down market, and deliver threat intel to the folks that you typically might not think, could afford it or could get it, could use it. So
awesome. Yeah, great to see. Jason, thank you for your time. I think it's added it will add a lot of value to, especially people in the UK going through that process, or even thinking about it in 2-3 years time, or even just at the end of the year, about how they prepare and invest in their themselves, regardless of where they're deployed.
Yep, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Cheers.